The Galactic Concordance was holding its yearly summit on Varelian Prime. It floated above the planet like a shining jewel in space. The city was full of diplomats, scientists, and leaders from across the galaxy. All kinds of aliens were there, some tall and thin with glowing skin, others short and round with 6 eyes. Most did not think much of humans. To them, humans were newcomers. They had only been in space for a few hundred years. Compared to species that had been flying between stars for millions of years, humans were still babies. But something big had just been found. A fleet, massive, ancient and silent, had been discovered drifting near the edge of known space. No one knew who built it. Some said it was from the First Empire, a group so old no one remembered their name. Others thought it was a lost war machine from an extinct race. Everyone wanted to study it. Everyone except humans. Daniel Harper stood outside the main hall where the leaders were talking. He wore a simple jacket and carried a small data drive. He wasn't invited. He didn't have a title or rank, but he had something they all wanted: answers. He walked in without asking. The guards looked confused but let him pass. Maybe they thought he was with someone. Maybe they didn't care. Inside, the room buzzed with voices. A Zalari diplomat was speaking, its long tongue flicking as it talked about treaties. Then Daniel stepped forward and tapped the microphone. "Excuse me," he said. "I think you're looking at this wrong." The room turned quiet. Eyes from every species stared at him. "I've studied the fleet," he continued, "and I can prove something you won't believe. That fleet, it's not alien." A Thrin scientist laughed. Its crystal body chimed like glass when it spoke. "You think humans built something older than most of our empires?" "Please." Daniel smiled. "Yes. Humans built it. And I can prove." The room exploded with noise. Some laughed, some whispered. One Vectar diplomat clicked its mandibles in disbelief. "This is absurd," said a female Zalari. "Humanity has no history of deep space travel before the 22nd century. Daniel held up the data drive. "That's what you think? But I have evidence. Real proof. If you want to know the truth about that fleet, you'll hear me out." Silence fell again. Not because they believed him, but because they were curious. One of the senior diplomats finally spoke. "Show us." Daniel nodded. He plugged in the drive. The screen behind him lit up, and the galaxy began to change. Daniel had not always been the man who challenged the galaxy. Before the summit, before the fleet, he was just a salvager. He worked in deep space, picking through the wreckage of old ships and forgotten stations. It was during one of those jobs that he found something strange. He had been scanning an asteroid near the edge of the solar system when his sensors picked up something under the surface, something made of metal, not rock. He landed and dug through ice and dust for hours. What he found changed everything. A sealed chamber with walls covered in symbols. Some looked like writing. Others looked like maps or diagrams. Inside were machines unlike anything he'd seen. Most of it was broken or too old to work, but one device still had power. It was small, flat and warm to the touch. When he connected it to his ship's computer, it began to send data, images, sounds, voices speaking in a language no one knew. Daniel spent weeks trying to understand what he had found. He shared some of it with a few trusted friends, including Laura Mendoza, a systems engineer who helped him decode parts of the files. What they saw shocked them. There were pictures of Earth, but from long ago, when the continents looked different. There were records of ships leaving the planet, flying faster than light. And there were names, human names. These weren't the people from history books. These were humans no one had ever heard of. Humans who had left Earth thousands of years, before modern humans even reached the moon. The logs told a story of a great war, a war fought far from Earth, between these ancient humans and a powerful enemy. The final entry came from a woman named Captain Elise Ward. Her voice was calm as she recorded her last message. "If anyone finds this," she said, "know that we did not run. We stood our ground. And if you are hearing this now, maybe it is time to remember us." Daniel knew then that this wasn't just a discovery. It was proof that humanity was older, stronger, and more important than anyone believed. And now, Standing in front of the galaxy's most powerful beings, he was ready to show them the truth. He took a deep breath and pressed the button on his data drive. The screen behind him lit up with the first image of the ancient fleet, and the galaxy leaned in to watch. The room stayed quiet as the images played on the screen. Ships unlike any seen before filled the display, massive, sleek, and covered in symbols that looked like writing. Some of the alien scientists leaned forward, eyes glowing or blinking fast with interest. But not everyone was impressed. "This proves nothing," said a tall Zilari diplomat named Virektal. "These could be fakes, or copies made by scavengers." Daniel didn't argue. He just smiled again and clicked another file. The screen changed. Now it showed maps, star charts showing systems no one had recorded before, and there in the center was a point labeled clearly in English, Sol System. Gasps spread through the crowd. Even some human scientists hadn't seen this before. "This data comes from deep inside the asteroid," Daniel said. "It predates our known space history by thousands of years. These humans weren't just explorers, they were builders, fighters. And they left Earth long before we did." A female Thrin scientist stepped forward. Her crystal body shimmered as she spoke. "You're saying these ancients were real? That they fought a war out there?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, and I'm not the only one who knows it." At that moment, a signal came in from deep space. It was a message sent to every major station and ship in the room. The voice was young, but clear. "This is Laura Mendoza. If you want proof, look up." Everyone turned to the main window of the summit hall. Outside, orbiting Verelian Prime, was a Thrin research vessel. No one thought much of it, until its sensors picked up something strange. Laura had been working undercover for weeks. She had accessed the alien network and found a way into the ancient fleet's AI core. Using open-source code and her own smart thinking, she had sent a simple command, and the fleet had responded. Lights flickered across the distant ships. Long-dead systems began to wake. Not fully, not yet, but enough to be noticed. Back in the hall, the aliens stared at the sky in shock. "They answered," whispered one of them. Daniel looked around the room. "That fleet isn't alien," he said. "It's ours. And now, it's waking up." For the first time, no one laughed. Some looked afraid. Others looked amazed. And a few, for the first time ever, looked at a human with something new: respect. The Galactic Concordance could not ignore what had just happened. The ancient fleet, silent for thousands of years, had responded to a human command. It was no longer just a discovery. It was a mystery that demanded answers. After hours of debate, the Council agreed to allow a joint team to board one of the ships. Not just scientists this time, but a mix of humans and aliens. Their mission: to find out how much of the fleet still worked and who these lost humans really were. Daniel Harper was on the list, so was Laura Mendoza, now hailed as the first person to communicate with the fleet's AI. They were joined by Kethral Vex, a Vecthar diplomat who had once mocked Daniel but now seemed deeply interested in what they might find. They traveled aboard a small research shuttle escorted by 2 alien warships. As they got closer to the largest ship in the fleet, the so-called flagship, everyone fell silent. It was huge, bigger than most space stations. Its dark hull was covered in old battle scars, but parts of it still gleamed like new. Strange symbols ran along its sides, glowing faintly as if waiting to be read. Laura checked her scanner. "There's power," she said. "Not full systems, but something still alive in there." A docking tunnel extended from the ship to the shuttle, like it knew they were coming. The moment they stepped inside, lights flickered on, slowly lighting up long, dark halls. "This place feels watched," Daniel whispered. They moved carefully through the corridors. The walls were lined with screens, some cracked, others showing static. But then they found the bridge. It was untouched. Dust floated in the low gravity. Control panels blinked weakly. At the center stood a command chair, empty but clean. as if someone had been there not long ago. Laura walked to the main console. She connected her device and began running scans. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, then stopped. A voice filled the room. "Welcome back, Commander Ward." Everyone froze. Daniel looked at Laura. "Who's Ward?" Laura shook her head. "I don't know. But whoever she was, this ship remembers her." She pressed a button. The main display lit up, showing a woman in a military uniform. Her name tag read, Captain Elise Ward. The recording played. "This is Captain Elise Ward of the Remembrance Fleet. If you are hearing this, then maybe we didn't fail completely. Remember us not as ghosts, but as guardians." The screen went dark. No one spoke. Outside, more lights flickered across the fleet. Something was waking up, and it hadn't been seen in the galaxy for a very long time. The voice of Captain Elise Ward echoed in the silent bridge. Her face, frozen on the screen, stared ahead with calm strength. Daniel stepped closer to the console. "Play the rest," he said. Laura tapped a few keys. The screen flickered, and another log began. "This is Captain Ward. If you're hearing this, then maybe our message has finally reached someone who can understand it." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "We were humans. Not like the ones who stayed behind, on Earth, but explorers, soldiers, guardians. We left thousands of years ago looking for answers among the stars. What we found was not peace, we found the Zorath. The name meant nothing to the team, but the way she said it sent chills through them. The Zorath were not just enemies. They were something older, something cruel. They wanted to erase us, to wipe every trace of humanity from history." She looked directly into the camera. "We fought. We lost many. But we did not fall completely. We built this fleet, not just to fight, but to protect, to seal away the danger so it could never reach Earth again." Laura's fingers flew over the controls, pulling up more files, more logs, more voices. One was from a young pilot named Marcus Lee, another from a scientist named Dr. Helen Park. Each one told pieces of the same story. A war fought far from home, a final stand, and a sacrifice no one had ever known about. Kethral Vex, the Vector diplomat, clicked his mandibles nervously. "They didn't just die," he muttered. "They gave everything to stop something worse." Daniel turned to Laura. "If they sealed the Zorath away, where are they now?" Laura brought up a star map. A glowing line showed the edge of known space. Beyond it was only darkness. "There," she whispered. "Somewhere out there." Just then, the lights on the ship dimmed. A low hum filled the room. The systems were waking up more fully now. A new message appeared on the screen. "Warning. Containment field weakening." Laura's eyes widened. "Something's breaking through." Daniel looked at the others. "We need to get back, now." As they ran from the bridge, the voice of Captain Ward played one last time through the halls of the ancient ship. "If you're still out there, help is coming." But now, no one was sure if that help was meant to save or to warn. The message spread fast. Across the galactic concordance, through every station, ship, and world, the truth was now known. The ancient fleet was built by humans. Not just any humans, ones who had lived long before modern history began. At first, there was silence. Then came shock, then fear. Some alien leaders called for the fleet to be destroyed before humans could use it as a weapon. Others argued that humanity had proven itself worthy of respect. For the first time in centuries, the galactic concordance was divided, but Daniel Harper and Laura Mendoza didn't wait for politics. They knew what was coming. Back on Verelian Prime, they met with Kethral Vex, who now stood with them. "If the Zorath are breaking free," he said, clicking his mandibles nervously, "then we all have something to fear." Laura showed him more data from the ship's logs. The Zorath were not just enemies. They were a force that had consumed entire star systems. The ancient humans had stopped them once, but now, after thousands of years, the barrier holding them back was failing. Daniel turned to the others. We need to prepare. It wasn't just about proving humanity's past anymore. It was about protecting its future. Word reached Earth quickly. Governments scrambled. Scientists worked non-stop to understand the tech now waking up across the fleet. And young people, engineers, pilots, soldiers, stepped forward ready to learn from the legacy left behind. Laura led the effort to rebuild what had been lost. She trained teams to operate the recovered ships. She decoded old battle plans. She even found records of weapons no one had ever seen. Meanwhile, Daniel traveled across human space, speaking to anyone who would listen. He told them the truth. Their ancestors had fought and died to protect the galaxy. Now it was their turn to stand up. Back at the edge of space, more lights flickered across the fleet. Ships that had been silent for millennia were now fully awake. And far beyond the border, in the dark where no stars shined, something was moving. A signal was picked up, an old one, being rebroadcast from deep space. It was a warning, and it was getting louder. The Galactic Concordance could no longer ignore humanity. What had once been seen as a weak, young species was now known to be one of the oldest in the galaxy. The ancient fleet wasn't just a relic, it was proof of a forgotten legacy. For the first time, humans were given a seat on the council, not as guests, not as students, but as equals. Laura Mendoza stood on the bridge of the USS Remembrance, the newly reactivated flagship of the ancient fleet. Around her, human engineers worked alongside alien tech experts, learning how to fly and fight with ships built by their long-lost ancestors. Daniel Harper watched from the observation deck. He had spent his life searching for something bigger than himself. Now he had found it not in space but in people, in the way humans stood taller, spoke louder, and believed in themselves again. Earth had changed too. Cities that once looked only inward now turned their eyes to the stars. Schools taught new history lessons, factories built new ships. And across the world, young men and women volunteered to join what was being called the New Human Guard, a force trained not just to explore, but to protect. But not everyone celebrated. Deep space scans showed growing instability at the edge of known space. The barrier holding the Zorath was weakening. Something was pushing through. Laura received a message from a deep space relay station. It was old data, rebroadcast from beyond the border. She played it on the main screen. It was Captain Elise Ward's voice again. "This is Captain Ward, if you're still out there. Help is coming." Laura looked at Daniel. "Do you think she knew we'd be here?" He nodded. "I think she hoped we would be." Outside the ship, more lights flickered across the fleet. Dozens of vessels, once silent, now ready for war. Kethrael Vex, the Vecthar diplomat who once laughed at Daniel, now stood beside him. "We will stand with you," he said. "If the Zorath return, we all fall." Daniel looked out into the stars. "Then we don't fall. We fight." And so, the human dawn was not with fear but with strength, not just as survivors but as guardians once again.